The world of Little Nightmares has always been a terrifying place. From the distorted environments to the grotesquely twisted people, there are so many details worked into the world building that are visually uncomfortable. However, the sounds of Nightmares is all audio, no visuals, an immersive recounting of a young girl's descent away from the real world and into the nowhere, a space where nightmares and realities blur and have you start to question, what is the true horror? For those interested in experiencing the story yourself, this is where we cross over into spoiler territory. You've been warned. The Sounds of Nightmares centers on young Ruth, better known as Noone, a moniker she gave herself due to the bullies at school referring to her as No One. Noone is a patient at the county psychiatric institute following her worsening nightmare disorder. She was previously cured of a water sickness caused by a parasite. This garnered Noone and her family national attention because she was often interviewed on television, bringing her family fame and fortune in the process, with even those bullies now sucking up to her to bask in the glow of her newfound celebrity. However, following being cured, Noone started to experience nightmares and a headache which caused her great distress and led her parents to placing her in the institute. Here she meets Otto, also known as the Counselor, a psychiatrist who specializes in working with children. He also has a preoccupation with dream-related disorders that stem from his own childhood trauma when his sister Cece disappeared after her own bout with nightmares. Otto is initially focused on helping Noone overcome her parasomnias, but more and more she describes them as real, with her nightmares feeling indistinguishable from the waking world.
As if I'm watching a film that I'm also the star of. And when I woke, it was here, in the copy. That felt more like the dream.
He takes particular note of the rarity of the ability to perceive temperatures and smell in dreams.
Scent while dreaming is a rarity, an indication of sensory transcendence.
Noone's retellings begin to bear an eerie similarity to Cece's, who also exhibited the ability to perceive temperature and smell in her dreams. Noone often refers to a figure she calls the Candleman, a constant in each of her nightmares, often sensing his presence before she even sees him.
The Candleman stood before me, on the rooftop. He wore a long, filthy jacket. His presence, it reminded me of when the tide goes out. And his face, it moved beneath his hat, like soup, bits and pieces rising and sinking.
Her description of the Candleman reminds Otto of Cece's description of someone from her nightmare she referred to as the Ferryman, and he questions the possibility that the two could be sharing the same dream, which seems virtually impossible, being that his sister disappeared decades ago. As the sessions progress, Otto's focus shifts from treating Noone's nightmare disorder to his own fixation with the Ferryman, and all of his psychiatric integrity falls by the wayside after he witnesses instances of Noone temporarily vanishing as she slept.
I was monitoring her ultradian sleep cycle. There was no REM-NREM oscillation. Instead, involuntary spasms grew progressively worse. As I was about to wake Noone, her body evanesced for a split instant, then returned, calm as can be.
What he once considered a transpersonal phenomenon, he now believes could be a gateway to another world, a world that shares a space with our own that can only be accessed through dreams, with the Ferryman as a guide.
And the lurking presence of the Ferryman. While he may be a master of dream manipulation, he's no denizen here. Noone said it many sessions ago. He does not belong in our world. And yet he is the connective tissue. I am determined to find his arcane hinterland, to cross into the place she calls nowhere.
Despite her protests, Otto begins to monitor Noone by use of electrodes as she sleeps, and later even while awake, which causes her increasing discomfort. Her nightmares, coupled with a pea-sized tumor growing on the right side of her amygdala, have made these sessions quite painful for her.
They maintain it's benign, despite the unusual ocular appearance. The mass's location could impact fear response, emotional salience, and damningly, dreams.
But Noone's distress is secondary to Otto's obsession in understanding whether these are mere dreams or evidence of another plane of existence. His curiosity morphs into desperation. Who is the Ferryman? Is this the same man that Cece saw in her dreams? Did he take his sister away and shatter his childhood innocence? Otto pushes Noone further and further beyond her comfort zone, placing his own desires above his role as one who should be helping her heal from her affliction. The further she's pushed, the more Noone becomes unsure which world is truly the one of nightmares.
More riddles. He doesn't think I can solve them, but I will.
I already did. I think he means by giving myself to his world, I won't be ill any longer. That's why, when I'm there, no more headaches, no more parasites, no more tests.
That's not true. It's not.
I would almost prefer him to take me.
Don't say that.
Away from here. From you.
It's what he wants.
Maybe.
He wants you.
Maybe your Cece felt that way too.
Despite her discomfort, Otto insists she show him the way to the threshold of transcendence, the place where he can face the ferryman and demand to know what happened to his sister. Connecting his mind to Noone's, he seeks to share her dreams so that he may follow her across worlds.
My machine requires you to be asleep, Noone. The dormant brain generates theta waves, patterns which the device uses to align neural pathways through a computer interface. Once our brainwaves are tuned, well, do you remember when we considered mutual dreaming? This facilitates that experience.
Nightmare disorder, also referred to as dream anxiety disorder, is characterized by vivid and often disturbing dreams that frequently occur and often awaken the person from their sleep. Unlike night terrors, where the dream is forgotten, in nightmare disorder, the sufferer remembers their dream in great detail. This condition may be brought upon by significant life stress that has been compounding for Noone since she contracted the water sickness. Hypnagogia is the transitional state from wakefulness to sleep. Within this threshold of consciousness, we can experience parasomnias, including hallucinations, lucid dreaming, sleep paralysis, and in Noone's case, a nightmare disorder. If you've never experienced hypnagogic hallucinations, I can assure you they feel quite real. I've personally seen and heard thieves rummaging around in the dresser of my bedroom, and I once even had a rousing conversation with Fred Flintstone. While that might sound fun, I've also felt the pitter-patter of killer doll feet climbing onto my chest. So it's in this hypnagogic space that Otto believed lied the source of her distress, with the intention of helping her manage her anxiety through the use of imagery rehearsal therapy, where the dream is retold but the ending is changed to make it less frightening and thus alter the outcome of the dream itself. As the line between real world and dream world continues to blur, Noone describes waking up in various locations of the nowhere. The Stone Giant.
This was the true building. There were a million rooms like the second one I paid into, all the way up with hands and limbs reaching out from between the bars that kept them locked in. My heart pounded like one of them, a prisoner trying to get free.
The Bathhouse.
The big one was before me, barely resembling a human. His body was raw and brown. He rapidly repeated, "Divide the gram from the divine," over and over. I suddenly realized who the creature was scrubbing with. It was poor Jester, sobbing and thrashing for his life.
The Shopping Mall.
It was so alone, it took to imitating. Then it said, "Are you going to leave, like all the others?" I managed a yes. The pulsing worsened until another voice came within the first. "You've driven another away." I felt bad for it. Or them. This place had been warped by pain and wanted so badly to keep me. Even the walls began throbbing. What could I do?
The Carnival.
I tried to scream, tearing my throat, but I had no breath. And then I saw the dummy, its lumpy face peering out from the shadows at the top of the tent, waiting for Rusty.
Present in each of her trips is the Candleman, holding her hand, guiding her along the way. The more she floats down through the dark mist, the more she feels connected to the Candleman and to the strange new world. When we think about the world of Little Nightmares, we tend to think only about the eerie and dangerous universe of the nowhere. The mall, the nest, the pale city, the spiral, a universe full of distortion and decay. But how do these children end up here? How does this plane of nightmares cross over with our own?
He didn't speak, but somehow I knew. The Candleman wanted me to open myself, place. Yes. He has for a while now.
Little Nightmares revolves around the theme of childhood fears. It explores the darker recesses of human nature as seen through the eyes of a child. As Otto treats Noone for her nightmares and she travels back and forth from this life to the other, her world, which should be a safe place by comparison, more and more becomes the world that feels unsafe. She was bullied and ostracized at school. She was stricken by a parasite and acquired the water sickness. The cure for her sickness resulted in her being poked and prodded by numerous doctors as though she were a science project. The rarity of her cured condition thrust her into the spotlight, robbing her of any autonomy and agency over her own life. And then she was left with headaches, a tumor, and a recurrence of nightmares where she had to be placed in a psychiatric facility, separated from her parents for several weeks.
Then poked at, studied, talked at, and hooked up to medical machines, and for what? For my head. A fire burns in there, and I want to sleep. But I'm afraid at the same time, and that nurse is always interrupting.
The atmosphere of the Little Nightmares franchise and its story elements symbolizes different aspects of childhood fears and a monstrous side of humanity. Gluttony, vanity, escapism, morbid curiosities. But the true horrors begin before the children even cross over. Noone was already living a life that was quite traumatic for her, and the manner in which the adults sought to address her trauma only served to add to its complexity. Doctors poked and prodded. Her illness and treatment was exploited, and she was paraded around as a curiosity in front of the whole world. She spent weeks in a psychiatric facility separated from her parents. The inspiration for Little Nightmares was childhood trauma. Trauma in children can manifest in heightened emotional responses such as anxiety, depression, and of course, fear. Physical symptoms such as the sleep disturbances that Noone experienced are also quite common. Noone also struggled to maintain healthy attachments with her caregivers, as those she was supposed to be able to trust became additional sources of her mistreatment. The children of the Little Nightmares world have to face monsters too big and too powerful to fight head-on. Throughout the universe, we see a variety of ways the children respond to trauma. The kids in the bedroom of the mall curl up in silent resignation. Jester, a child Noone meets in the nowhere, undergoes memory disturbances and forgets the punchline of jokes he's known for retelling. Six becomes emotionally detached from the other children, viewing them only as objects to aid in her progression. And we definitely can't forget her unexpected aggressive actions and morbid fascination with death. Nightmares are a recurring reminder of the threats that are a constant in their life, and the nature of stealth of the game represents the feeling of being small and powerless in a world full of threats. The evolution of Six from vulnerable to powerful, and the transformation of Mono from hero to antagonist reflects the loss of childhood innocence and the loss of humanity. But for Noone, her feelings of helplessness turn into regaining control over her own fears. She too loses her childhood innocence by taking on the responsibility to save the other children she encounters, feeling the emotional burden of having to save others.
From the corner of my eye, I noticed the little cone sneaking away. The balloon-headed man was inches away, and in that moment, I thought of Jester, of the child with gooey hair, of Rusty. I couldn't do nothing, not again.
Taking pleasure in melting the bather that chased after her. She wasn't even disturbed by the dark nature of the abandoned shopping mall, and she was even able to fend off those god-awful living mannequins that still give me the creeps.
And he trotted to life, grabbing my leg. Yanked until I fell and struggled to break free, kicking at him, but he held tight to my ankle. Reaching for a nearby bottle, he smashed it into his head.
Otto views the Candleman / Ferryman as the guardian of the threshold from one dimension to the next, and even after he discovers Noone's tumor, he decides not to tell her, lying to himself that he's doing it for her own peace of mind, to not stress her already fragile state. But in reality, it was for his own selfish reasons, because he viewed Noone as the only conduit to help him heal his own childhood trauma, to give him the answers to the questions that had plagued him throughout his entire life.
It's not you that's different, but the physical space around that.
I said I want to talk about my mum and dad. When most kids have nightmares or whatever these are, they go to their parents to feel better. Here, I relive them again and again. And it's all you want to talk about because you think you can find Cece through me.
Otto's intentions and interactions become just as corrupted as the Nowhere. He demands that she satisfy his wishes, blaming her for not trying hard enough, accusing her of standing in the way of his life's mission.
Try. Interact with the dream.
There was no more.
Ask who he is. Ask what he wants.
It doesn't work that way.
You were right there. Don't tell me you did nothing. Not a damn thing.
Stop!
I'm beginning to doubt you've seen this Candleman. Perhaps you've invented the whole story.
Please stop my head!
And it's likely here that Noone's reception to the nowhere became the most powerful. The nightmare world being visually rotten on the outside, while her world appeared normal but felt rotten at its core. Despite witnessing so many children meeting their demise, Noone found her strength. Her headaches were gone, and she was able to fight back against the horror she encountered. Children adapt to trauma in all manner of ways and find their escape in the most unexpected forms.
Sleep into nowhere.
Take my hand again. Not you. The Candleman. I'll be lost without him.
By the time Otto is ready to have Noone lead him across the threshold, she finds comfort in the descent, putting her trust in the Candleman, who may be trying to protect her, but more than likely has misled her into trusting him, allowing her to lower her guard so that she may open herself up and remain trapped in the nowhere forever.
Sink into these tideless waters.
He's taken my hand, welcoming me to the other side of the door.
Meeting the same end as so many of the other unfortunate children, or possibly just as worse, surviving long enough to become one of the monstrous adults who prey on the next generation. Children who remain in the nowhere piece by piece begin to lose who they are.
I feel like I'm beginning to forget, and maybe talking will help me remember.
Because you've been away so long, or you literally feel you're losing your memory?
More like I'm losing a part of me. I can't tell. Am I the girl here or the one there?
Slowly becoming warped and twisted mentally and physically by the corruption of this world. All of the inhabitants are watched over and forever changed by the ever-present eye. Perhaps the deity of this corrupted universe?
They're all eyes, too. Every size and shape you could imagine. Watchful. Shimmering. Blinking. Their light dripping down into the dark mist. I feel them looking at me. Into me. And they like what they see.
It changes those that live within it. The frightened children become horrific adults, an outer representation of their inner demons, such as the inner decay of the morality of the counselor, a psychiatrist who believed it justified to secretly drug a young child in order to put her to sleep so that he may continue on his own personal quest. The nowhere needs the innocence of children, the fears of children, the pains of children, that opens them to this dimension in a way that adults no longer can. Ruth, Noone, no one, entered the door and crossed the threshold willingly. She opened up herself to step fully into a new life, a nightmare of a life, but one that she felt more within her control than the life she currently lived. And who knows, maybe she'll continue to face her fears and not succumb to the dismal fates of all the others. But given how things have ended for Six, Mono, and of course the poor runaway kid, rising above the evils of this world doesn't seem very likely. If you made it to the end of this, I truly thank you. This video started as one idea and then morphed into something else, and I appreciate you hanging in there with me. I couldn't address everything, of course, so I'd love to hear your theories or what you feel I missed. I'll also link the playlist for the full Sounds of Nightmares in the description, and if you enjoy these more darker themes and games, you just might enjoy my explanation of Bramble the Mountain King. Fantastic game. I'll see you in the next one.